Hey, this is Bailey,
And I'm Timothy.
and welcome to Wet Sleep Podcast.
Let's get right into it.
Woo. Hello, I returned.
Welcome back.
Sorry, I was absent last week. I had some sinus and migraine issues, but
It is that time of year.
mostly just sinus issues now, but I'm better. My face doesn't hurt as badly as it did last week.
So I had to dive deep to try and find a really interesting and compelling UFO story for you guys, since we really haven't covered UFOs yet.
Yes.
You know, we've done the conspiracies, we've done ghosts, we've done demons.
Man, I'm ready for the aliens.
So, and Dyatlov Pass really inspired me.
Oh,
to,
really? Good.
Do aliens.
That could technically be considered an alien story, depending on what you believe.
I feel like that more so falls under conspiracy. But
Oh, so you've changed your mind. You
no,
don't think it's
still
aliens anymore.
aliens.
Oh, okay.
It's 100% still aliens, but I'm just saying there's different theories. Anyways, and I got to say the parachute mines were very convincing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
still aliens.
I mean, there's still
they're
legitimate
alien mines.
legitimate records of mine testing, but it's okay.
Yeah. Well, today I bring you probably, besides Roswell, probably one of the more convincing stories of aliens.
Oh, okay.
Even an abduction. So it's not just a sighting.
So it's like a whole...
It's a whole thing.
The whole package.
It's a whole thing, man. Today we're going to be talking about the Travis Walton abduction. If you have not heard of it, you're going to learn today and might believe in aliens at this point.
I mean, aliens exist, so...
I mean, yeah, but...
It's very selfish to think that we're the only things in the entire universe.
Well, I mean, people still think the Earth is flat, so...
That's true.
So to start off, this UFO case begins on November 5th of 1975 in northeastern Arizona in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest.
Okay.
Notice that a lot of this kind of happens in the Arizona, Nevada area.
Yeah, well, that's because the government's hiding all the aliens in the desert.
Oh, snap. Well, this isn't exactly in a desert, but a logging crew of 6 men were working on a government contract. Boom. Aliens, government, connected. Yeah.
Hand in hand, man.
They were clearing a forest for some development. The men loaded into a single pickup truck, leaving for work. And as they started their journey home, they saw not far from the road a, quote, luminous object shaped like a flattened disc.
Okay.
You know, so like a typical UFO.
An alien.
Just kind of flat disc. All of the men agreed that Travis Walton, captivated by the sight, left the truck to get a closer look. So they got pretty much what happened is they were in the trees, like kind of on like off this little main road a little bit, and this kind of truck. They saw the UFO kind of hovering there a little bit in this little clearing. And Travis Walton, for whatever reason, got out of it and walked towards it, which I do not recommend you do if you ever see aliens. So as he approached and was kind of looking up at the object, a very, very, very bright blue light struck him and actually levitated him off the ground and threw him away from the aircraft.
And this is the witness accounts of the other people with him, right?
Yes.
That's insane. I absolutely would leave.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, Travis, if you were my best friend, no.
That's actually what the other 5 people did.
Smart.
After seeing that, they immediately fled the scene in the truck.
Okay, good.
And, you know, after they ran away and they realized that they completely left like one of their friends behind, you know, they argued amongst themselves and they decided to go back and see if they could help Travis, make sure he was still alive, things like that.
He has been beamed. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
He's
well,
gone.
When they returned to the scene, they found no trace of the aircraft or Travis. He just
no trace, like nothing.
Vanished, like nothing ever happened.
Wow.
There's no trace.
Okay. That's scary.
So, a personal friend of Travis's, Mike Rogers, was a crew foreman and the driver of the truck. According to him, as the men fled the scene, he looked back and saw the luminous object lift out of the forest.
Okay.
And
what?
Just disappear past the horizon.
That's so scary. Bye, Travis. Like,
yeah,
I guess.
Peace out.
Wow.
Rogers and the other 4 workers eventually would take a lie detector test after doing this and spreading word.
Yeah.
But here's the thing that kind of makes this interesting. All of the men passed.
Yeah.
Not a single false answer.
That's crazy.
And
I mean, I have opinions on lie detectors.
polygraphs, it can only get you so far, but the fact that not even a single one failed out of, 5 of them.
I mean, I believe them.
Yeah. 100%.
Regardless.
Shortly after, they passed the examination, of course, newspapers caught wind of it, and it quickly became like a really big, like, national spotlight story. Well, Walton reappeared 5 days later.
What?
Yeah, he just reappeared, confused, scared, with weird memories of seeing alien entities, and he even had like a full-on description of the inside of the aircraft.
Oh, okay.
He was also subsequently subjected to a number of polygraph examinations. The Travis Walton event would soon become the very first abduction case to be given serious consideration by credible scientists.
Nice.
And his story would face the general public to reevaluate previously closed-minded opinions on the subject.
Right. He, I think I know his name is like one of the most popular, like, prolific abductees, because he still does.
Well, he doesn't do it as much because he kind of wants to be left alone now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Dang.
Because he was tired of getting harassed. I think at one of them, crew members actually changed their name and moved out of state because he was getting harassed so much, and he's like, I just want to put it behind me.
Leave people alone. Enjoy the story and go home. Don't.
Yeah. So
don't harass the people.
The 6 witnesses of this controversial case describe the craft in personal but yet very similar terms. Okay. So Rogers' description depicts the craft as a, quote, large, glowing object hovering in the air below the treetops about 100 feet away.
Right.
Testimony by Dwayne Smith described the craft as, quote, smooth and giving off a yellowish-orange light. Additional eyewitness accounts added the following, quote, unbelievably smooth, a flattened disc with edges clearly defined. Walton and Rogers both estimated the craft was about 20 feet in overall diameter.
That's pretty big.
A little large.
It's pretty big.
I mean,
so yeah, like I think, in my opinion, that gives it a little bit of credit too, because it's like, it's not a rehearsed story if there are slightly different details. You know what I mean? So it's literally just their version of the story. If it's like wildly different, that leans the other way into like, okay, well, you guys are lying, but it's also not word for word the same story. So that gives it more credit to me.
I think the thing that kind of draws me to this case so much is, I don't know if y'all listened to one of our previous episodes where I described my personal experience with a UFO. It kind of similarly matches the description of it.
Yeah.
Of one I saw. Not exactly the same shape or anything. It was more of like, a flat cylinder rather than a completely flat disc.
Yeah.
It still had like that circle shape, but it wasn't completely flat.
Yeah.
And it had green and red lights going around it.
It would make sense if there was
and it was slightly wider than 20 feet.
Close living colony of aliens that we haven't discovered yet.
Maybe.
It would make sense if it was the same.
But so I think that's why I like this case so much, is because it's kind of similar to what, I saw.
Yeah.
But
interesting.
Believe that if you will, but I promise you it's true. The details of the event quoted from the investigators' report are as follows. As Walton approached on foot across the clearing, the, quote, UFO began to wobble or rock slightly and then emitted a bluish light from the machine.
Huh.
A blue ray shot out of the bottom of that thing and hit him all over. That ray was the brightest thing I've ever seen. This light sent Walton backward through the air 10 feet.
Oh, wow.
Hurled through the air in a backwards motion, falling on the ground on his back, flying like he'd touched a live wire.
That's scary.
The horror was unreal.
Yeah, super scary.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what I'd do if I saw that and someone just got launched by this thing.
I would leave.
Well, they did, but,
Right, yeah. I'd feel really bad, but I would try to get as far away from that. That's terrifying.
Yeah. Luckily, mine just like hovered and went away. I didn't see nothing. Like, it didn't do nothing to me. Polygrapher Cy Gilson relates from his documents the following. Testimony from Alan Dallas, quote, during the pre-test interview, Mr. Dallas related the following events that occurred on that day. Mr. Dallas said they had finished work for the day and were heading home. It was almost dark. He saw a glow coming from among the trees ahead of them. As they came to a clearing, he saw the object he called a UFO. Mr. Rogers was slowing the truck down to stop as Travis Walton exited the truck and began to advance towards the UFO in a brisk walk. Mr. Dallas described the UFO as being a yellowish white in color. He said the light emitting from it was not bright, but a glow that gave off light all around itself.
That's weird. Okay.
Mr. Dallas saw Walton reach for the UFO, stop, and look up at it. He said it looked as if Walton was standing there slightly bent over with his hands in his pockets. Mr. Dallas said the UFO began to wobble or rock slightly, and he began to become afraid. He put his head down towards his knees. As he did so, a bright light flashed that lit up the area, even the inside of the truck. He immediately looked towards the UFO. He saw a silhouette of Walton, and Mr. Walton had his arms up in the air. Mr. Dallas turned towards him, Mr. Rogers, who was in the driver's seat, and yelled for him to get the hell out of here.
I mean, fair. What a terrifying scene.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And I mean, you're talking about loggers. Like, these are like some big dudes.
Yeah. Doodly dudes.
Doodly dudes. And they are...
I'm sorry for that.
terrified of this thing.
Yeah.
Sworn testimony from Mike Rogers. Mr. Rogers was on the opposite side of the truck from the UFO. He had to bend over slightly to view it in its entirety through the truck windows. He described the UFO to be glowing a yellowish tan color. You could not say if the light emanated from within the UFO or was a lighting system outside that lit up the UFO.
Yeah, it must have been bright.
I mean, it lit up the entire truck.
Yeah.
So he did say he could see the shadows of the trees on the ground around the UFO. He said it was round and about 20 feet in diameter. He said the UFO was about 75 to 100 feet from the truck. As Mr. Rogers started to move the truck, a brilliant flash of light lit up the entire area, even inside the truck. It was described as a prolonged strobe flash. He did not see a beam of light emit from the UFO and hit Walton. As the flash occurred, Mr. Rogers turned around in his seat to look at the UFO again and saw Mr. Walton being hurled through the air in a backwards motion, falling on the ground on his back. At this time, Mr. Dallas and someone else yelled to get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
According to the story, upon returning to the scene, the crewmen searched briefly through the woods, calling Walton's name. They then proceeded down to the main road, and after some debate, decided to call the police and ask for assistance.
Smart. They would, I mean, going back, they probably would have died in a horror movie, but at least they 100%. Called the police.
They were first met by Deputy Ellison and subsequently by Sheriff Marlin Gillespie, who would later describe the crewmen as apparently sincerely distressed. The officers and crewmen went back up the hill and searched again with flashlights, eventually calling off the search and making plans for a more thorough manhunt beginning early the next morning.
Scary. Okay.
The next several days were marked by unsuccessful searches for the missing Walton, including some use of helicopters and dogs.
Oh, and the dogs didn't even catch anything?
Nope. Temperatures dropped below zero the first 2 nights of the search, dimming hope that he was alive. Meanwhile, law enforcement officials were looking for alternate explanations of the event, including the possibility that Walton had been murdered.
Yeah,
makes sense. I mean,
yeah, it's a very fair theory, but you know, they wouldn't all have called the police and taken them directly to the scene of the crime. You know what I mean? In my opinion, I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like if somebody's gonna murder somebody and try to get away with it, I feel like making up a UFO story would be like the last thing they would do.
Yeah. In
my opinion, I mean, but
I agree.
You bring up UFOs to a lot of people and, you know, they're going to be skeptical.
I think it comes down to like there's a missing person. So they would, regardless of the fact, have to take it seriously.
100%.
So
law enforcement, looking for a more believable explanation, began a thorough investigation of the facts. All 5 remaining members of the crew were questioned over and over again.
Right.
Family members and friends were also interrogated. One fact that colored this questioning was that all the men were unlearned, everyday working people, noted to be a little, quote, rough around the edges.
Yeah.
The common belief at the time was that Dallas and Walton had fought and that Dallas had either accidentally or purposely killed Walton and hid his body.
No, they wouldn't have called the cops.
Well,
I get it, but they, you know.
The problem with this theory was that if a murder had taken place, why would the other 4 crewmen risk the fires of justice to cover for Dallas?
Right.
A second theory put forth at the onset was that possibly all of the crewmen had been involved in some kind of brawl or argument and accidentally killed Travis, hiding his body somewhere in the vast forest. If this was true, why concoct a story involving a UFO abduction, being one of the most unbelievable stories one could put forth, as we just said earlier? Another scenario offered by some was that since the crew was behind on their government contract, they were looking for an excuse to get out of it. So with the logging crew, they were contracted by the government to clear out like a large forest area in like a pretty short amount of time.
Yeah, and there's only like 6 of them, wasn't there?
There were 6 of them, and they were, I forget exactly how far they needed to go, but it was hard for 6 people to clear out that much forest in that little amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I could see them saying, hey, Walton, go hide somewhere for 5 days, go hide out in like my girlfriend's house or whatever, my mom's house,
Right.
Somewhere they wouldn't look for you. And then we'll tell them that this is an alien abduction. And then, we'll get the contract extended if need be, blah, 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 blah. But I mean, the polygraph test, which I don't believe in, the polygraph test, the mannerisms after the fact, you know what I mean? Like, it's an alien.
Oh, yeah.
I get where they're coming from.
Like, it makes, like, their reaction makes sense.
Right.
To, being told a story like this with a missing person.
Yeah. Gotta look at all the real.
I'm sure if I was a cop back then and someone came, it's like, my friend got abducted by
I would have been so
I'd be like,
honestly, I would have been so hyped.
Oh, man, I would be like,
let's go see it.
But I mean,
Tell me all
you're
about
talking about like back then.
Yeah. 1970, what, 5?
1975. Yeah. In their initial reports, the 5 crewmen had indicated a willingness to undergo any kind of lie detection test to establish their truthfulness.
Okay.
After the second day of searching, law enforcement officials brought in Cy Gilson, a polygraph examiner from the Department of Public Safety associated with the state police, to test all 5 of them. 4 of the witnesses passed this polygraph examination, while the 5th, Alan Dallas, the test was ruled inconclusive, which means unable to assign a reading. While the successful test fueled media interest in the case, the inconclusive result for Dallas put some heat on him personally. While some of the crew members, such as Rogers and Walton, had been friends long before the Forest Service brush clearing contract, others were only acquaintances. And in the case of Alan Dallas, he and Walton were said to have had some personal animosities.
Well, I don't know. I still don't trust lie detector tests, polygraph tests.
Oh, and this is actually a artwork.
Oh, okay.
That was actually made up for the story in the newspaper.
That's awesome.
So you see him just getting whacked.
Right. It's like a laser beam.
Yeah. If Walton had been involved somehow in a conspiracy to deceive authorities, he left his closest family members out of the loop. Right. At approximately 1:30 a.m. on the morning of November 6th, crew members Copland and Rogers went to notify Walton's mother, Mary Collette, of her son's disappearance. Miss Collette's calm response was upon being wakened and told her youngest son had been kidnapped by UFO was, quote, well, that's the way these things happen.
Okay. I mean, that's a little bit weird. But honestly, like, I can see her just kind of being a mom who was woken up from her nap, like, okay, sweetie.
Right.
Like that's kind of how I imagine that was. Like,
okay, bud.
Yeah. No.
Okay,
not
bud.
even okay, bud, but like a motherly, okay, sweetie.
Yeah.
Go back to bed, okay? Cute story. Where's my son?
But here's the weird part. She then proceeded to describe 2 instances when she and or her oldest son, Dwayne. I'm so bad with names.
I'm leaving that in. That's Dwayne.
I know, it probably is, but I'm just saying, like, if I didn't know the English language, like I clearly don't. I'm not gonna say Dwayne. I might say Dwayne. Anyways, she then proceeded to describe 2 instances when she and her oldest son, Dwayne, had also seen UFOs.
Good job.
Later that morning at approximately 3 a.m., when Miss Kellett told Walton's sister, I'm so bad with names, bro, Miss Grant Neff, that a, quote, flying saucer got him, Miss Neff surprised Copland with how calmly she took the news. The rest of that day was taken up by an extensive search of the area where Walton allegedly disappeared. Curiously absent from the site was any physical evidence of anything happening in spite of the, quote, explosive force of the blue-green beam. No blood, no shreds of clothing,
nothing.
No evidence of the blast effects was found on by any of the nearly 50 searchers involved.
That's so weird. Okay, why?
For as many UFO proponents there are that many and more debunkers.
Right.
The authorities tried to keep the scene of the incident for serious forensic examination, but the mass influx of people, not only local but worldwide, made this impossible.
It ain't none of your business. It's interesting, but ultimately it's a crime scene. Stop tampering with evidence. It's not your business.
Well, people are interested in this stuff.
Sure, but you're only gonna hurt yourself. Like, if you want to find evidence of aliens, let it be collected. Don't ruin it. You're only hurting yourself.
Yeah, well,
I don't get it.
The crewmen's stories were treated with mixed opinion. Some marveled to hear what they had seen, and some called them, quote, pranksters and liars. Some even went as far as to suggest that the whole account was nothing more than a joke gone bad, and that Travis was hiding somewhere and would suddenly reappear on cue. At this stage of the investigation, there was one question on the minds of all involved, whether friend or foe: where was Travis?
Yeah, that's fair.
The last thing that Walton remembered about the incident in the woods was the feeling of going backwards and then nothing. Nothing, that is, until he awoke in pain, frozen in pain with an overwhelming thirst.
Oh, so this is an account now? Okay.
Slowly making out the image of some kind of light, he comes to the realization that he is lying on a table of some kind, still very weak. Walton realizes, oh my God, the hospital, they brought me to the hospital.
Yeah, okay.
Reasonable.
Yeah. Hopefully that's where you end up.
Hopefully. Sweating from the moist, humid air, he finds that he is uncomfortable because he is still in his work gear and his jacket is pushed up under his arms. This is a quote from him. "I wonder why the nurse didn't at least take my jacket off." Feeling a strange-looking device curved around his body, he tries to focus his vision on the blurry figures of the doctors and nurses who certainly had come to his aid.
Right.
His vision clearing, he suddenly sees who is there. To his shock, he is staring into the face of a, quote, horrible creature. There were three of them, gazing right back at him with luminous brown pupils the size of quarters. Travis attempts to push one of them away with what little strength he has at the time. Strangely, the creature shoots backward with ease. And, quote, it felt spongy and soft.
Ew.
He would later relate.
I mean, I guess so would skin.
Yeah.
You know.
But
weird. Okay.
bringing himself to his feet, Travis readied himself for a fight like a caged animal. Looking for something to defend himself with, he grabs an unfamiliar-looking tube and tries to scare his captors with it. A tube? Some kind of tube.
Okay.
Screaming at the three entities. Quote, keep back, damn you.
Picking up the nearest object, that would happen to me too. Like, if I was in trouble and I tried to pick up the nearest thing to defend myself, it would probably end up being like a blanket or something. Something entirely non-threatening. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that'd be me. That comedic timing, like,
yeah.
Well, this is a pool noodle.
I've got this blanket here. Watch out.
Apparently, the creatures stopped in their tracks when he got up and readied this tube.
Okay. They weren't about that.
He said they were thin, puny, covered with marshmallow-looking skin.
Okay.
Their small hands were delicate and without nails. They were totally bald. Their heads were disproportionately large for their little bodies. The only facial features that didn't appear underdeveloped were those incredible eyes. Those glistening orbs have brown irises twice the size of those of a normal human's eye, nearly an inch in diameter. The iris was so large that even parts of the pupils were hidden by the lids, giving the eyes a certain cat-like appearance.
That's scary.
There was very little of the white part of the eye showing. They had no lashes and no eyebrows. Their little mouths never moved.
Alopecia.
Travis was ready for the fight of his life. Suddenly, inexplicably, the aliens left the room through an open door, and he thought to himself, I have to get out of here.
Yeah.
So this is when it starts getting really weird.
Okay. As if it wasn't already.
like you'll see. Looking through a curved hallway opening from the room, he saw no one in sight. Frantically searching as he moved, he passed a doorway and then thought, should I go back? Did I miss a chance to escape? Cautiously approaching the room, he looked in and saw a circular room with a domed roof, and 3 rectangular doorways were shut.
Okay.
The room was empty except for one chair facing away from him.
That's scary. No.
He thought, could someone be sitting in the chair out of his view? He circled the room, watching the chair, never wanted to see one of those hideous creatures again. Finally convinced that the chair was unoccupied, he began to move toward it. A strange thing began to happen. The closer to the center of the room he got, the darker the room became.
Ugh.
Small points of light began to appear on or through the wall of the room.
What does that mean? Like being projected onto the walls or like through the ship?
It looks like it's going through the wall.
That's
but it's
so
just
weird.
Being projected
Okay.
on. But
I got you. Okay.
Experimenting with strange-looking controls on the chair, he felt afraid that he might draw attention to himself.
No, don't push buttons for something
right?
you don't understand. Even if you think you're on an alien spaceship, don't go pushing buttons.
Yeah.
You never know. Like, there's
self-destruct initiated.
I don't think that exists, but
it does.
It could.
I mean,
you know,
could, honestly.
As far as you know, they're all self-destruct buttons. Don't do that.
So he got up and left the chair, not wanting to draw attention to himself.
Okay.
As he walked to the edge of the room, the stars which were once visible faded out, and the surfaces of the wall, ceiling, and floor became visible. So
it's kind of like
after looking back, he
of...
thought it was like a projection of like the star system that he's in, or something.
That would make sense. That'd be really cool,
right?
I wish that was in my room.
They actually
feel like I'm in space. No, but take the walls away.
Oh, that'd be
all
cool.
the books.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just like put you in a little bubble.
I want to get one of those little projector boxes that like project like galaxies onto like thing. I want to get one of those, but like a lot of them look really lame.
Yeah,
they look nothing like the pictures. So he approached one of the rectangular doors and he searched for some kind of control to open it, but found none. He walked back to the chair. Travis hears a faint sound and a door suddenly opens, and standing behind him is a human being.
A human. Okay.
This man was over 6 foot tall and muscularly built. Running up to him, Travis starts asking questions. No sound came from the man. The man took Travis by the arm, leading him down a narrow hallway. Stopping in front of a door that suddenly opened itself, they entered a small, bare room. Again, Travis tried to get a response from the man, but his efforts fell on deaf ears.
Okay.
Travis spent only a couple of minutes in the small room, and then another doorway opened. From the open doorway, nice, fresh air came in, and next Travis proceeded down a ramp to a floor. Looking back, he could see the craft that he had just exited. This craft was much larger than the one he had seen in the woods. He estimated diameter at about 60 feet in diameter.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Travis had now left the large craft and entered a large room. Within this room, he could see several other smaller saucer-type crafts. Travis was now taken through a hallway to another set of doors, which also automatically opened. And through this door, he entered a totally white room with a table and a chair. Travis's attention was immediately drawn to 3 other humans in the room. This time, there were 2 men and a woman. These 3 had similar characteristics to the first human he had seen. All 4 of them had a family-like similarity. Travis again tried to initiate a conversation, but again to no avail. Travis asked a couple of questions along the lines of, would somebody please tell me where I am? What the hell is going on? What is this place?
Right. As you would.
Reasonable questions. The woman and one of the men took Travis by the arm and led him to a table. Travis became frightened, wondering what they were going to do. All 3 of the men gently pushed Travis back on the table, and the woman took an object that resembled an oxygen mask, yet no tubes attached to it, and only a small black golf ball-sized sphere.
Okay. All right.
Travis tried to push the mask away, but suddenly felt weak, and next came nothing but blackness.
I'd be terrified. This whole scenario sounds like a nightmare.
Honestly. One thought came to him before consciousness left him. What happens next?
Yeah.
Obviously.
Fair.
I mean, at that point, it's like, this is where I die.
It feels like a fever dream. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The investigation of the disappearance of Travis Walton was nothing short of mass confusion. The town of Snowflake had been swamped by newspaper and television reporters from all over the world, and just a lot of...
I mean, media eats this kind of stuff up.
Yeah.
All over the place.
But, you're talking about like a relatively small kind of town, and then all of a sudden all these people are here. And just gets a little crazy and overwhelming. Everybody took a side. It seemed at the time that opinions were equally split. One side thought this whole mess will be over as soon as they find his body. The other side thought, where in the world is Travis hiding and when will he come back? Neither side had long to wait. The continuing search for Travis turned up absolutely nothing except innuendo and theory. All speculation would be put to the test when 5 days after allegedly being hit with a beam from some sort of flying craft, Travis suddenly reappeared.
Right.
Travis stated, quote, consciousness returned to me on the night I awoke to find myself on the cold pavement west of Heber, Arizona.
Okay.
I was lying on my stomach, my head on my right forearm. Cold air brought me instantly awake. I looked up in time to see a light turn off at the bottom of a curved, gleaming hole. As I raised my head up, a white light caught my eye just before it blinked off. Either a light had been turned off or a hatch had closed, cutting off the light from inside. I only caught a glimpse as I raised my head. I could not be sure which it was.
Interesting. So he saw them leaving.
Travis further stated, then I saw the mirrored outline of a rounded, silvery disc hovering 4 feet above the paved surface of the road. It must have been about 40 feet in diameter because it extended several feet off the left side of the road. It was too large for the highway, and it extended past the roadside to my left to clear a cutaway rock embankment on the other side of the highway.
Okay.
It appeared to be about 14 feet high in the center. Travis continued, for an instant, it floated silently above the road, a dozen yards away. I could see the night sky, the surrounding trees, and the highway center line reflected in the curving mirror of its hole. I noticed a faint warmth radiating onto my face, then abruptly, it shot vertically into the sky, creating a strong breeze that stirred the nearby pine boughs and rustled the dry oak leaves that lay in the dry grass beside the road. It gave off no light, and it was almost instantly lost from sight. The most striking thing about its departure was its quietness. It seemed impossible that something so large moving through the atmosphere at such speed would not have shrieked through the air or even broken the sound barrier with a sonic boom.
That's interesting.
So again, kind of comes back to how my encounter was. It was a complete silence, but it was about, as wide as like a 2-story house.
Right, yeah.
And it was complete silence.
I wonder if they just have a higher pitch than that we can't hear. You know what I mean? Maybe. It could have made a really loud noise.
Is there something we couldn't pick up?
Right.
That's a possibility.
That's what I believe.
But you would even think like shooting through the air would create noise.
Apparently not.
I scrambled shakily to my feet. My legs felt rubbery. I swayed and then caught my balance. I looked around and recognized the deserted stretch of a curving road as the highway that wound down the canyon into Heber from the west. I ran wildly down the deserted highway across the bridge into Heber, stopping at the new building across from the Union 76 service station. No one answered my desperate knocking. No cars passed by. I ran down the highway over the second bridge to the row of telephone booths at the Exxon station. I dialed the operator, and he called his sister. She was the only nearby relative with a telephone.
Right.
My brother-in-law, Grant, answered. It was 12:05 a.m. I was in an incredible mental state, difficult to describe. As best as I can remember, I shouted something like, they brought me back. Then I babbled, I'm out here in Heber. I'm out here in Heber. Please get somebody to come and get me. My hand shook as I held the cold receiver. Grant was not amused. He took this call to be another cruel joke, saying, quote, I think you have the wrong number. He replied sarcastically, starting to hang up. Wait, it's me, Travis. I screamed hysterically into the receiver. Where are you? He asked, still suspicious of a joke. I'm at the Heber station, Exxon station. Okay, he replied, almost apologetically, yet still cautious of a prank. Stay right there. I'll come and get you. Just hang on. Okay. Which I think that's kind of messed up that people would call the family with somebody missing.
It happens so often.
I just think that's a little messed up.
Incredibly messed up, but it happens so often.
Yeah.
I don't understand why people do that. People can get arrested for that though, which yeah. I'm glad for. They can go to prison for an amount of time, but it still does damage.
Yeah. That's just rude. Grant drove the 3 miles from Taylor over to Snowflake and found my brother Dwayne at Mom's house. He told Dwayne about the call and of his doubts it was really me. Dwayne, too, thought the call might have been yet another example of someone's idiotic concept of humor, but they decided they couldn't risk not investigating. They set out for Heber. I keep trying to say Heber. They set out for Heber, 33 miles away. Quote, lights suddenly shone into the phone booth. Relief flooded over me when I raised my head and saw the headlights of Dwayne's pickup. Dwayne and Grant got out and came to where I was, still slumped in the phone booth. Dwayne opened the glass door of the booth and helped me to my feet. Am I ever glad to see you? Grant said.
Aw.
Dwayne helped me into the warm truck and asked Grant to drive. On the way to Snowflake, I tried to tell him about what happened to me, but I just couldn't get it all out. But they were awful, white skin, great big eyes. I sobbed in horror. Take it easy, Travis. You're all right now. They didn't harm you, did they? No, but those eyes, these horrible eyes, they kept looking at me.
They were probably beautiful.
Just so you're okay, that's all that counts, Dwayne said. Everyone has been worried sick about you. If it's already after midnight, I must have been unconscious for a couple of hours, I replied shakily, because I only remember about an hour or an hour and a half inside that thing. Dwayne and Grant looked at me strangely. And Travis, feel your face, Dwayne said. Good heavens, if I just shaved this morning and it feels like a week's growth. I exclaimed, still not comprehending. Travis, Dwayne said gently, you've been missing for 5 days.
All right. So we felt like he was only gone a couple of hours?
Mm-hmm. But it's been 5 days.
That's insane. Can you imagine 5 days of your life are just gone like that in a couple of hours?
After Travis was found, the first consideration of family and friends was his health. Only a few bruises and scrapes marred him physically. His mental condition, that was a different story. Obviously. Travis's older brother, Dwayne, tried to protect him and handle the authorities, but it was ill-equipped for what was to come.
Yeah.
UFO research groups descended on the family, local and state
quote-unquote
police.
research groups.
Quote-unquote research groups, you know. They're just enthusiasts.
Yeah.
Local and state police were hungry for some answers. Profiteers, racketeers, freaks, debunkers, and skeptics all wanted a piece of Travis and his story.
Yeah, fair, but leave him alone.
Right. Already angry at thinking they had been hoodwinked, they couldn't wait to say, quote, I told you so. I knew it was a hoax. They were all hoodwinked. They couldn't wait to say. Was this another fraudulent, stupid story of, quote, little green men? The collusion of National Enquirer and APRO would have an adverse effect on the case. They care whether or not the story was real. Were they interested only in selling the papers? Of course. That's all they care about. Yeah. It's a hot topic, so of course they're going to be like, we need to get everything on it.
But it would be really cool if they actually had some proof of aliens.
Yeah.
They're there, but whether or not they've been to Earth is obviously up for debate, but...
not to me. I've seen them.
Well, yeah, so...
The research group APRO had a reputation of being a fair and open-minded organization.
Okay.
Certainly not able to investigate all UFO reports, they had to be choosy and look into the most credible cases only. Not especially overflowing with financial backing, they were put into the position of having to rely on the National Enquirer bankrolling the investigation in exchange for the exclusive rights to publishing it. Which...
I guess.
But my thing is like, how does that help you at all? Other than funding your thing, they're the ones posting it.
Well, so if they're the only ones with the story, they're the only ones that can sell anything because, like, other places can copy off of them, from their paper.
But how's that helping APRO rather than just the National Enquirer?
The APRO is the one that funded it?
No, the National Enquirer is the one who funded them to investigate, but the National Enquirer is the one who gets the rights to publish the information.
Yeah. So
not APRO. They're the ones doing all the work, but they don't get publishing rights.
APRO was the reputation, the high reputation for open-mindedness and fairness. So, it would be good for somebody who wanted to sell the story to have a reputable company be the ones to investigate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I get that.
Rushing Travis to a lie detector test was a mistake. Still in a state of mental confusion, he was unsure exactly what had happened. He only recalled bits and pieces of information at first. But in time, his memory slowly returned, and Travis's first lie detector test showed deception. Subsequently, he would pass 12 others, one as late as 1993.
Oh, wow.
Some 18 years
He had to have been
after
so
the fact.
tired of it.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
At that point.
It would seem incredibly strange that 4 witnesses of an event would pass an examination with one inconclusive and the victim of the event itself fail.
Right.
It should be noted that all the witnesses subsequently passed all lie detector tests given to them. It was also reported that one of the crewmen was offered $10,000 to say the whole case was fabricated. Though certainly tempted by the huge sum of money, he stuck to his original assertion. The Dallas test was only tainted by the fact that he was allegedly wanted for questioning related to a crime and also had some family problems unresolved.
Interesting.
Like a fairly large sum of back child support.
Yeah, that'll do it.
His name in the papers would most assertedly alert searching family members and authorities to his whereabouts.
Yeah, pay your child support. Come on.
Despite allegations of a hoax by well-known UFO investigators, no one had brought forth any proof to substantiate their claims.
Right.
Despite a massive search by approximately 50 volunteers, aided by dogs and helicopters, no physical trace of Travis Walton was found during the 5 days of his disappearance. During the 25 years since the case began, not one person has brought forth any information indicating where Travis was or even alleged a possible sighting of him during the 5 days. Law enforcement officials, though claiming hoax all the while, never presented any evidence to put a dent in one of the crewmen's statements, which remains the same to this day.
Yeah.
From a theoretical standpoint, it is highly unlikely that 6 men, common everyday working men, could put together an elaborate hoax, pass lie detector tests, stand up to questioning, and stick to the same incredible story for a quarter of a century without a break.
Yeah.
The stress of the investigation caused personal problems among the men, yet they still stuck to their stories. Though Walton did receive money for his story, it was not until many years later that he gained financially from it. Reviewing all the facts presented to date, it is also advisable to mention that it is easier to prove that something happened than to prove that it didn't.
Right.
It is also very easy to simply yell hoax without tenable proof. However, in the shadow of all the crewmen's statements to date, it is very compelling to say that something very extraordinary and unusual did happen on November 5th, 1975, in the remote forest of Arizona. The Travis Walton story, quote, "Fire in the Sky," remains one of the most intriguing reports of UFO abduction today.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's
which is actually the reason why it's called Fire in the Sky is because it did inspire the movie Fire in the Sky.
Oh, interesting.
So, and that is the case of Travis Walton's abduction. He's still out and about. He did go
Leave him alone.
Every now and again. He does go to AlienCon.
AlienCon, yeah.
He actually went last year before this whole COVID thing started.
Yeah.
So he's still out and about telling his story.
That's pretty cool.
Doing all that. So he's still out and about. I know that some of the people are actually still getting harassed.
Which is ridiculous.
So
I feel so bad. That's why people don't come forward with their stories. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So
nobody wants.
You know it's bad when one person has to change their name and like essentially disappear off the face of the earth.
It's a shame he had to do that, but UFO, I understand it. Right. Yeah.
So
he could have.
Yeah, but
could have come back.
So shout out to AppalachianGhostWalks.com/UFO Center. Really helped me out with gathering a bunch of information and whatnot. Travis Walton does have a book, so check that out if you want like his firsthand accounts of everything, where he definitely goes into more detail. There's also an 80-minute documentary about this whole thing.
It's the Fire in the Sky, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So
cool.
Check that out.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is Travis Walton's story.
Very interesting. Aliens exist, and
they do.
That's probably what happened.
I seen them.
If you guys like that story, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at What Sleep Podcast, and you can find us on Twitter at What Sleep Pod.
Because Twitter's annoying. Please leave a like and subscribe if you're on YouTube. Go ahead and leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts if you'd like.
If you would be so kind, we would enjoy it. We like seeing all your friendly comments.
We like seeing everything. You can also email us at whatsleeppodcast@gmail.com if you want any sort of recommendations to be heard. If you have any...
If you guys have listener stories, I'd really love to have another episode for listener stories.
Yeah, so feel free to email us that with any listener stories, feedback, things of that nature.
100%.
We
read them all.
We read everything, honestly. So be sure to do that. We do have merchandise for sale as well. You can find that at teespring.com/stores/whatsleep. So be sure to check that out. We got hoodies, mugs, face masks for your COVID needs.
And Christmas is coming up, guys. Those would make for some pretty good gifts. Keep your family warm with some, What Sleep hoodies or sweaters. They're very soft.
Yeah, I actually really, really like their hoodies.
I do too.
Very nice.
And if you guys want 15% off of all merchandise, you can subscribe to our Patreon for only $5. And for the whole month, you get 15% off of our store, which is really cool.
Oh, yeah.
And you help support us and our endeavors in eventually getting a new mic. I'm sorry, a second mic.
A second mic.
So that I don't have to yell at the microphone.
Yeah.
I don't have a very loud voice. Help a girl.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're working on everything. So please be patient with us as we do that.
Regardless, we do appreciate you guys.
Yeah. And
thanks for listening.
Did pass a really cool milestone. We actually did pass 1,000 total downloads. So that's across all of our platforms. So we really appreciate that.
That was awesome to see.
Oh, yeah. We actually got 50 downloads in a single day.
That was insane. Where are you guys at? Where did that come from?
Honestly. So
we appreciate that so much.
Yeah, it was really cool to wake up one morning and sing
people like us, right?
Yeah,
no,
maybe
people listen to us.
We're all right.
Cool.
So yeah, we will see you guys in the next episode, and until then.